Today we're here to talk about Greg Moore. Unfortunately, I wasn't alive yet when Greg passed, so a better way to find more about him than talk to the people that he was closest with. So, let's find out more about him. See you up front. It will be 20 years since we lost Greg Moore. I've been learning a lot about him lately. You got to meet him, I believe, correct?
Yeah, and that's my favorite memory of him. Honestly, was the race in Toronto back in 1999, the year that he passed away. I was lucky enough to stand outside his trailer for like 3 hours or something, and he finally came out when there weren't many people around, and I got to sort of chat with him a little bit one-on-one and talk about my go-karting at the time and tell him I was a big fan, and he was such a huge inspiration for me. So it was obviously very tragic when we lost him, but I still wear red gloves to this day to honor Greg, and I still have blue and gold on my helmet to honor Greg, so I drive with him a little bit every time. Greg always was famous for wearing red gloves. Even though he had a totally blue race car, he always wore red gloves. So no matter what color race car I've driven silver, green, black and gold, and for me it's always going to be red gloves.
I was a little too young, but I mean, looking back at it, he's a total legend. I remember him being a very nice guy. I remember him being tremendously fast. And I know Hinch looks up to him with the red gloves, so that's cool.
What kind of thoughts come to mind when you hear the name Greg Moore?
I only know of Greg because of James Hinchcliffe's fascination with him.
Red gloves.
The red gloves. I don't know much about him other than how insanely fast he was, but I can't say that I've really watched any of his races or know much about his history. So I know James is a huge fan. I know James kind of tries to emulate him in a lot of ways, so obviously he was a pretty good role model from that standpoint, and he definitely left a pretty big imprint on the sport.
What Greg was to James is what people like Nigel Mansell to some degree are to me. Like that guy who is, you feel like you could be if everything went well. So I think everybody needs that one person they can get behind, feel like they would, if everything went well, you could be. So, I know James was a huge Greg fan, and I mean, actually, you talk about nice liveries. He always had a good livery, to be fair. So,
because he was so talented, and that livery was awesome. The player's livery was probably one of the best liveries of all time. And yeah, red gloves rule, and he seemed like such a good guy. Obviously, I didn't know him, I wasn't born yet, but everybody seemed to love him, and he was such a good character from what I can tell in his interviews and stuff, and super genuine. So I don't have any stories about him, but I know he was one badass driver.
Greg Moore was a phenomenal driver, a very uprising talent. Actually, it's funny you say that because Gilles de Ferran's been my mentor, and I don't know if it's public knowledge, but I think it is. Greg Moore was coming to Penske the year that unfortunately passed. The next year was coming to Penske, and Castroneves got the seat. So, I feel like, it's very unfortunate what happened. It was a horrible accident, but he marked his time. And I think as a race car driver, an athlete, you want to be able to mark your time, and he definitely did that.
As the driver who took over for Greg at Penske, how different do you think your career would be today if you were still with us?
Don't know. Destiny is something that you can't predict. But I tell you what, things happen for a reason, and God's always have a plan, so you got to trust him.
How different do you think Helio's career would be today if Greg was still with us?
Well, it's hard to say. Someone that you lose at a young age like that. He was a great driver, one that we thought could come to our team and give us a lot of success, and with that he'd have success. So to me, it's just hard to say. I mean, he was a good young man, and we were ready for him to be a driver for us. And obviously the tragic accident on the big oval was he lost his life, so we lost a great friend.
Would he have used number 99 on your team, or number 3 like Helio used?
Well, I think he probably would have used number 2. We like number 2, and I think he'd have liked number 2 also.
Growing up as an IndyCar fan in the 90s, what kind of thoughts come to mind when you hear the name Greg Moore?
Oh, Greg Moore, he was one of the best, very fast. It's really a shame that Greg didn't get to see his whole career out. because I think he would have been, one of the best in the record books. But very fast, passionate race car driver. Loved racing. Loved everything about the sport. Was a great friend from everything I've heard from people. So those are the things I think about.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Moore was just one of those characters around the pits that everyone loved. Obviously had a lot of friends in the paddock and was really fast. Fantastic on super speedways. Obviously, I never got to meet him, but I did get to see him race.
I might have met him when I was a kid, but I was too young to remember. But obviously, he left an incredible legacy. I wore red gloves when I drove Hinch's car to try and, keep up what Hinch does. So I think it's really cool. And, obviously, he's a legend of the sport for sure.
And since I've been in North America, my respect for everything that he achieved has just went through the roof. There's not many people as talented as what he was, and honestly, people like that is what drive us all to work harder now, so that hopefully we get remembered in the same way. Hopefully, not as early. Get remembered as that legend status.
I didn't know Greg super well. I knew him a little bit. He was very close friends with Max, and a couple of guys who drove for my dad. So Greg was kind of always around. In fact, I know that my dad had actually talked to Greg about coming to drive for him and stuff prior to that.
I knew 1998 was going to be my last year racing, so I met at Michigan a couple nights before the Michigan 500 in '98. I had dinner with Greg's father, and told him I wanted Greg to drive for us. And I think by that time maybe they had. It was either 98 or 99, but anyway, I think by that time they'd already kind of done their deal with Penske. But yeah, we talked about it, and it would have been very exciting for us to have had Greg as part of our team.
Greg was obviously a special talent. A guy like Dan and Justin and everybody that we lost him too soon, for sure. But you're definitely learning about a guy who had so much potential and could have done so much in the sport. And the next year, I think he was going off to drive for Penske, which was a huge thing. So that was his last race, with players, and he was a special talent. But he also had great exposure in Canada. People up there loved him. Obviously they love Paul Tracy, and now it's great to see him follow along and really, really cheer for Hinch and Robbie. Hopefully Robbie gets back out here with us soon. I know he's here this weekend, but you know what I mean, driving. But yeah, Greg was one heck of a talent, for sure.
Did you ever try to get him into the Target car? If so, what was it like trying to get him to switch teams?
Yes, in fact, we had some discussions with him, and we were just getting to know Greg when he passed away. Really, he was obviously a Canadian and driving for Players at the time, which backed a lot of Canadian drivers, and so as I recall, I think at the time he was going to drive for Penske the following year, and it came down to him with us or Penske, and I think at that time he decided to drive for Penske.
How did you go about finally convincing him to drive for you when he had been with the same team for so long?
Well, I guess we look for the people that have the most ability and the ones we think can be winners in our cars. And when their agreements come up from the standpoint of who they're driving for, we knock on the door and ask them, "Would you like to drive for Team Penske?" Well, Greg Moore we could see he was a superstar coming up, Canadian, and obviously we had raced in Canada and knew him, and he was signed up ready to go. And unfortunately, he had a tragic accident at the Speedway in the Oval. And, we never had a chance to see him compete with us. His dad and his family, and he would have been a young superstar. And he drove for the Forsyth boys for a while, and we saw how good he was. We wanted him on our team.
It's ironic. I was still working for Bobby Rahal when he came to work for us. They announced at Detroit in 1999. Roger announced that Gilles DeFerrin and Greg Moore would come drive for the team for the year 2000. But I was still working for Bobby Rahal. I didn't get hired until October of that year, so I was kind of the last one in. So it really wasn't my decision, but I was glad. It's obviously one of the big reasons why I came here, because I believed in him.
Well, Greg, he was very young, very brave, wasn't afraid to take chances. I was a more conservative driver than he was. I was a lot older than he was at the time, and he was a very capable driver. Greg was one of those drivers that really, electrified the crowd, electrified the people, especially the Canadians. I mean, he was, very popular in Canada because he represented such a great hope for Canadian motorsports. But Greg was quite a driver.
It's tough to answer in a way that can be perceived in the right way, because normally when you talk about somebody that is not longer with us, everybody has good things to say, right? They tend to say, oh, that guy was so special. But Greg was really special, was a real fighter, a guy with who I often had arguments, because we were made out of the same material, basically. We were both hot heads. We would both argue for the same square inch of circuit, and when two cars are pointing in the same direction, often you have wheel banging and all this sort of stuff. But nevertheless, it was a loyal opponent and very respectful of the most important rules, and it was a pleasure to race it with him. Even if most of the time when you were racing with him, you would come away beaten, and because he was a strong driver. And I remember in particular in '98, after the season was over, and I had already announced basically that I would go and drive in Formula One. We were playing pool together one night, and we already had a couple of glasses of wine, so we were, let's say, not drunk, but more happy than you are normally. He turned to me and he just, with this grin in his face, and he said, "You bastard, you going away. I would have had you next year, I'm sure." And you could really tell that he was absolutely sincere. He was missing the opportunity to challenge me once more. Yeah, this is the type of guy he was.
Well, he was the guy that everybody liked to go to his motorhome and hang out with and play video games. He was a friend to everybody, and universally well liked by all the drivers. I mean, it's really a shame that his career and his life was cut short, because he had a huge future in front of him.
I think of the track that year. A couple of months before, we went to Alcatraz together. We were with Tony Kanaan and him, and we had a blast. He's such a nice guy, He's a guy. He was a guy with a great future. So it's a shame what happened, but it's part of motorsports.
I was hoping you could give me a little background about this picture right here, where Greg is showing an unfriendly hand gesture.
I don't remember. It was I don't know where it was, either Michigan or in Fontana, and I don't know. I was a hard racer, and I wasn't going to move in. I wasn't moving, and he didn't appreciate it, and I didn't really care.
I never really got to know Greg Moore off of the racetrack. On the racetrack, he was a brilliant driver. He was one that you could trust, that you could run next to, and so he always had a great attitude. Every time I saw him at the racetrack, he was doing really well.
You're one of the few drivers who got to drive against him in his one appearance at Indianapolis Motor Speedway in an IROC car. I was hoping you could share some memories that come to mind when you think of him on or off the track.
Well, I got the chance to interact with him, and just a really down-to-earth, easy to talk to kind of guy. When you meet race car drivers, even though I was a race car driver, when you meet other race car drivers or you meet other athletes, in any other form of sport, you hope that they're just normal, easygoing people that are easy to talk to, right? You just hope that they are, and he was. He was just a very, very nice guy, and I appreciated that about him more than anything. Great race car driver, great accomplishments. He had a ton of friends. I think that says a lot about a person's character when they're well liked, especially by their peers, the people they compete against, because that gets very tricky and tough at times when you're out there racing on the track and they're sort of your enemy on the track, but yet you can be very good friends off the track. That meant that he was valued as an individual, and he had great character. So I found that to all be true when I got a chance to spend time talking to him.
What kind of things did you guys talk about? if you can remember.
Right, yeah, well, I mean, it was just racing and what our jobs were like and how our careers were going, the things that we might struggle with or like about what's happening in our own individual careers with sponsors and cars and being competitive or just sort of bouncing off ideas about what's working for him and what's working for me and things I've learned and things he's learned in just a short period of time, in the most recent things that we've been doing.
Wow, that's a long time ago, but I can tell you that the times that I had talked to Greg and raced against him were pretty special. He was one of the friendliest drivers that I got to meet from the IndyCar series. I mean, it was just special to race with him, because I think what I thought was amazing was getting to talk to him afterwards, and we talked about NASCAR, and I talked about IndyCar, I talked about what he did, and it just seemed like we just hit it off really quickly. And as far as what I remember the most was just how friendly he was, and how he just was just willing to sit down and just talk to anybody, and especially me at that time. I was like, man, this is really cool. I'm getting to talk to Greg Moore. I mean, this is amazing. So the first time I met him was just so easygoing, and it was a lot of fun to chat with him.
The more I learned more about Greg, the more I learned what he meant to his competitors, what he meant to the sport, the kind of driver he was. It's someone that I wanted to emulate. With, I mean, it seemed like he had a lot of respect, and I've known Max Papis for the majority of my life, because he was driving for Rahal when my dad worked there, and so he always tells the story that he was there the day I was born, which he pretty much was. So I call him Uncle Max, but he was obviously really close to Greg, and to hear his stories about Greg and his passion about that relationship that he had, and it was just something cool for me to get behind, and really validated, wanting to use this design on all my helmets.
So for you guys to know, although Greg is gone, it's never gone. I just received that from a friend of mine, and I would love to give it to you. And this year we plan, me, Dario, and Tony, that together with Greg were the 4 closest friends in IndyCar, in Champ Car. We're planning to do a 20-year anniversary party in Portland, where his dad is going to come out, his mom is going to come out, his best friends, as a way to honor what Greg did for us. And he was really one of the best friend I had not on the track, because on the track you have no friends, but was one of the best friends outside the track. And the best memory I can share with you is he came over in Italy in my house with Dario. He knew that Ayrton Senna, that was my coach and my teacher, slept in one bed in my house. And as soon as he arrived in my mom's house, he ran to the house, he talked to my mom, he wanted to know where that bed was. He told my mom, that's my bed for the day. So, that's the Greg I remember.
Fun guy. I mean, extremely like to joke around like I do. I mean, we have similar personalities. Very approachable and crazy fun. We had a lot of fun. I mean, we had a lot of stories. Some of them I can't really disclose, but I think the best one when we used to go on vacation together to Australia for a week and a half before the race, and we went boating, jet skiing, and bike riding, which we couldn't even do, like motorbikes. And he was definitely gone too soon. He was a dear friend, and I miss him every day.
First memory on the track. There's 2 really. There was one of the races in 1996 in his rookie year at Homestead, and he was passing everybody around the outside. He ended up being a lap down. I think something happened in the pit stop or something, or he got a penalty. He was a lap down, and he was unlapping himself, just blasting around the outside of everybody. And I was watching it in Germany. I was racing DTM at the time. I remember thinking, who is this guy? And he got out and he had these big glasses and everything, and I was like, he didn't look like a racing driver, but he was incredible. And then racing Brazil in Rio on the Roval, and him and Zanardi were fighting out, and he passed Zanardi around the outside and went on and won the race. And that was incredible. away from the track, there's 1,000,001 sort of memories I have of him. Just a great guy. He was so extrovert, so outgoing, and I think one of the reasons you see all these drivers hanging out together out there just now is because of him. Because before that, a lot of the drivers kept very separate lives, and it didn't interact a lot unless they had to. And he really sort of brought everybody together. There was that sort of group: Max, Tony, myself, and of course Greg. But then everybody, he would say, "Okay, guys, we're all meeting tonight here for a party after the race, or we're going to have dinner here." And this group got bigger and bigger, and the whole paddock became more friendly, I think, because of him. Not on the track. We all raced, just as competitively, if not more so, on the track, but off the track. So that was, that was one of the things that really, I think, one of the legacies he's left in the paddock, as well as his driving. But he was a great guy. It's, as you say, 20 years, and there's not really a day goes by I don't think about him.
I think really more just his spirit. I think that's why he was somebody that, the drivers liked. He was kind of a driver's driver. He had a great attitude. He was obviously well respected for his talent, but he was also somebody that, he really rallied drivers together. He was kind of the ringmaster between a lot of those guys, hanging out and doing stuff away from the track. Before that, you didn't see a lot of drivers spending time together, and he was really one of the first guys that started getting the guys together away from the track, and that was that created a sense of camaraderie. I think that's part of why his loss was felt so deeply by all the drivers and all the paddock, because he was really a beloved guy in the series.
I think it's quite similar. I think it's sort of a similar level. As I say, before that, I don't think it was as friendly. And some of the older guys, when we were coming up and all hanging out together, they looked down a bit. Well, what are you guys all friends for?
We were never friends.
So yeah, I think he definitely, as I said to you before, he turned a tide and changed the way the paddock, worked together.
Well, for one, he was a great friend, and it was a horrible day for us when we lost him. But he was such a competitor and a hard charger on the track, but yet behind the scenes and off the track, he was always the organizer to get everybody together to have a good time, and that's how we remember him.
It would be interesting to see what he looked like today. I see his dad all the time. I see Rick quite a lot, and we're going away in August fishing together, and you watch Rick, and Rick's over 70 now, and he looks so young, so it'd be very interesting to see what Greg would look like at this point.
By now, for sure. He may be just retiring. He probably would have lost his hair by now, and maybe or graying. But he would have had a Hall of Fame career, no doubt about it.
The things I can tell you is that I would have never imagined that racing would have built friendship that would last forever. Because when you're out there, you're competing against other guys. But friendship like with Dario, Greg, Tony, they are things that they are embedded in my heart, and they will be here forever. So it's something that I would have not thought that motor racing could surprise me, but it really did in this way.
Was there a car he tested for you kept somewhere special, like the Senna car?
I'm not sure.
He never drove one of our cars.
I'm not sure that he ever drove one of our cars, to be honest with you. I think that we were just about ready to step in, obviously, after the last race.
Yeah, I think he tested here.
Roger Penske told me he didn't drive one of his cars here at the track.
Maybe not here. Okay, well, maybe it wasn't here, but he tested the Penske at, was it Nazareth he tested at?
I don't think they ever tested.
Yeah, he did. He drove a Penske. But before, he tested a Penske in 95 or something. Yeah, he definitely drove. He definitely tested a Penske. So he didn't test afterwards. Obviously, he had that deal, but he never drove one at that point. Yeah. He would have loved this place. He would have been so good at it.
It never did really get to that point yet. Like I said, I didn't really get to spend as much time, as we were hoping to and planning on down the road. But so we didn't get time to get close. But very talented. We were really looking forward to that happening.
Well, Greg was obviously one of the best race car drivers you'll ever see, but he's one of the nicest kids you'll ever meet. And for us, he was going to drive for us the next race of the next season, and that was going to be my first year with the team. And Greg and I and Gilles de Ferran and Roger had actually gone to England the week before he passed in Fontana, and got to know him pretty well that way. Knew him as a competitor, but then started to know him really well as a friend. And it was a big loss for everybody. But the ironic thing is, after he passed away, the night before he was driving for us the following week, he and I worked on his helmet design for when he was going to drive for the Marlboro team. And his father sent me one of his Marlboro helmets, Roger one of his Marlboro helmets, and he kept one. So there's 3 of them. And it sat in my basement, still in my basement right now. And when my son Austin decided to race, he decided that he wanted his helmet to look just like Greg Moore's.
You and James Hinchcliffe have kind of taken up the mantle of Greg Moore's legacy, reminding my generation who he was. Can you talk a little about why Greg was so important to you as you were growing up?
Yeah, so when I started racing, I was born in 1998, and Greg passed away in 1999. So obviously, I didn't really know who he was when I was growing up until I really started my racing career.
And I told him, "How do you know you never knew Greg? You were 1 year old when Greg passed." And he goes, "No, I've read about Greg. I've watched videos about Greg. Greg is a lot like me."
Obviously, he was going to drive for Penske, and that was going to be my dad's first year working at Penske. So Greg was going to be his driver, and so he had a relationship with him. And in our basement of our house, he has a helmet that Greg was supposed to wear in his first year at Penske, and obviously he never got to use that helmet. And when I was growing up in my career, my parents never let me do any paint jobs on my cars, no paint jobs on my helmets or anything like that. But once racing got more serious and they decided to let me have a little bit more freedom and decide, all right, we'll pay to get a painted helmet and give you a little creativity here. And I said, well, I want my helmet to look like Greg's helmet.
And I said, well, you don't just paint your helmet like Greg's because you like it. You have to ask permission.
He's like, well, you can't just take someone's helmet design. So like, all right, what do you do? I was like, well, he's like, well, you at least have to ask his dad, and he asked Troy Lee, and you asked all these guys if it's okay to use Greg's design, even though you like it, you have to know more about him. And so I hand wrote a letter to Greg's dad, Rick, and sent it to him asking if I could use Greg's design. It would be great to honor Greg.
And his father thought it was great. He actually called Troy Lee, who paints his helmets.
And then he said, yeah, no problem. It would be awesome for you to run his helmet and his design, but you have to get Troy Lee to paint it. And ever since then, I've had Troy Lee painted all my helmets.
And then he sent Austin an autographed hero card of every year that Greg Moore drove.
You know, he sent me back a box that had Greg's book, and it had hero cards all signed by Greg in his 4 years in Champ Car.
And also sent him a set of stickers that Greg Moore put on his helmets all the time so he could put them on his dash and his helmets as he went forward. So our family has, I guess, a pretty good connection with Greg Moore and what he stood for.
They've all had Greg's design, and it's been really cool to be able to honor him, especially as my career's developed. I mean, I've had this design on my helmet since I was racing Legends cars, and kind of be able to showcase that story and be able to be, you know, have some sort of a legacy in what I do, because I feel like on the NASCAR side, you know, your helmet doesn't matter so much. It's more just about the sponsor, and which is important. But at the same time, I feel like on the IndyCar side, and like Formula One, or places where you can see the helmet, it's very important for the drivers what that looks like, and to kind of be able to bring that over here with this helmet and this design and what it means. And I even raced, when I raced in ARCA, I raced the 99 car because we had to choose a number. I'm like, all right, let's race 99 just because of Greg. So it's been a fun story to tell, and I hope to be able to wearing helmets like this for a long time.
What thoughts come to mind when you hear that name?
Well, what were you thinking about it when he passed?
I mean, I wasn't around, but I've heard he's very fast.
Yeah, I don't have a specific recollection, but I can tell you, you know, I spent 15 years running the men's professional tennis circuit, where a bad day was a high ankle sprain. And in this sport, with the daring of our drivers and the speeds they drive at. You know, we care about them deeply, and when anything happens, it moves the whole paddock and all of us. So it's amazing to me that the drivers are so fearless and so resilient. I've been in a hospital where I saw our drivers learn one by one that they'd lost a friend, and it's a very difficult thing, but the drivers and their families are sort of prepared for it.
That's one of those really young superstars, that just another one that didn't really get an opportunity to run at the Speedway. The other thing I think that Greg Moore always reminds us of how important it is to continue to focus on safety, to continue to try and make the cars safer so those drivers can go out and not have to worry about it and run as fast as Greg Moore did. Very, very talented Canadian that you start thinking about some of our drivers today, especially Canadian drivers today, looked up to him as a hero, and certainly somebody that was lost too soon.
James Hinchcliffe, he got the red gloves from Greg Moore.
Which is pretty amazing, right, when you think about that and what James has really done for the Canadian fan base and for Canadians in the sport. But again, like I said, you know, Greg Moore was one of those heroes and one of those super fast, talented people in an open-wheel car.
Well, he's one of those rare talents that we lost. It's unfortunate. As wonderful as the sport is, sometimes it can be very cruel. When it was not as safe as it is today, I lost many friends myself. You know, that's the unfortunate side. But on the brighter side, the sport has gotten a lot safer. If we would have had the safe walls and the protection that we have today, he would still be with us. But it's been an evolution and it's still a work in progress. But the safety has spared a lot of young talents in the last, few years. And that's but we will always miss the ones that could have been champions, like Greg Moore for sure.
Well, I didn't really get to spend a lot of time with Greg before we lost him way too soon. But what little I did get to spend with him, he was a great guy. You know, he's a great competitor, a heck of a driver, and and just a good guy in general. Across the board. So we really missed not having him around longer with us. He was so great for the sport and for the teams and for everybody involved. So it was a shame we had to lose him the way we did.
What thoughts come to mind when you hear the name Greg Moore?
Fast. Very fast. Very talented. Another one who was taken before his time. He could have really accomplished a lot of great things in this sport. Having lost a close family member at a very young age to this sport, it's rough, but you always got to think that these guys are gladiators, they're warriors, they're going out there, and they're putting that visor down, and they're not slowing down, they're not scared. So it's in terms of whenever I think of Greg Moore, the first thing that always comes to mind is blazing speed.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Moore was a great young driver with a big future. Was sadly taken from us at an early age. He was a true competitor. He had a great persona of a driver on and off the track, and had a passion for the sport that was unrivaled at the time. And we miss him.
Have you ever seen videos of him driving?
Yes, he was very, very talented, yeah.
What do you think of his driving style?
Sideways. He was sideways. He was, but he was always on the attack. Awesome driver.
He was very fierce. He was aggressive, but he was controlled. And, he had no fear, which is a trait that great race drivers have.
Just relentless talent. There were some highlight videos on YouTube that you can always go to when Greg did some incredible stuff. Actually, Hinch and I watched a couple videos not too long ago of Greg, which is really cool. So, just the fact that he was a really, really talented driver.
He seemed like a very fast, aggressive driver behind the wheel.
What do you think the record books would look like today if you're still with us?
I think he would have been, one of the record setters. I don't know in what, but he would have for sure set some records in his full career.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, there's no doubt he would have won more races, but he won a championship? I don't know. Obviously, if he had been with Roger, you would think that the chances were pretty good that he'd win championships, but you just don't know that. You can't assume anything. And the Forsyth team was a very good team, at that time Penske was a good team, but they weren't a dominant team by any means. So you don't really know. And he might have had more success. He might have had about the same. You just can't. And you can't judge it by what you see today, because it's a different world today than it was then.
The cars nowadays are so different from the cars then because there's not as much power. So I'm not entirely sure what to expect, but knowing what I do of Greg Moore and what I've seen of him in the past, I can only assume that he'd be right toward the top just like he was then.
I think it would have been really cool to see him run the Indy 500. Obviously, in his last couple of years of Champ Car, he was really good on the ovals, and I would have loved to see him be able to win some Indy 500s.
I think I don't know. I mean, he would probably be retired by now. I don't know. He'd probably be at the end of his career. So I think he would have had a lot of championships, Indy 500s, especially if he came to Penske. I mean, he would have had a fantastic career for sure.
Well, he was going to Penske, and I think he would be a multi-time Indy 500 winner and a champion.
He was suddenly a rising star. He had great results, great achievement, but for sure he was on the way of getting better ones.
And he had a lot more to give, because at this level that he was, as good as he was going to be better.
Greg would be an all-time winner. He'd be a Hall of Fame type person.
I'm sure he'd be right there in the mix. Very talented driver. He'd have been among the records for sure.
It's hard to say. I think a lot of people say the same thing about Ayrton Senna too. So you never know.
It's hard to say. I think the fact that guys still know and respect him to the level that they do tells you what he was able to accomplish and the impression he made in the time he was there with us.
Do you think he would have beaten AJ Foyt's record of winning?
Oh, I don't know about that, So far today, no one's done that, so...
Scott Dixon's close.
He's close, but he hasn't done it yet. So, I wished it was Greg, because Greg would be here with us.
I don't know. Texas got some records. They're pretty out there, but I would never say no. I would never say it was impossible.
I mean, Scott Dixon's getting there, so it could have been possible for Greg to do it too.
Absolutely, and Scott's not even that old yet. I mean, it's incredible what he's accomplished, and he's still going to be good for a long time. So that's great.
Do you think he could catch up to AJ's record of winning?
No, but he would, like I said, few championships and 2 500s.
Obviously, he would have had some championships and some wins, plenty of wins. But I'm certainly happy with our driver, who we have as a champion.
How different do you think the record books would look today if you were still with us?
Every single Indy 500 that Penske won, it would have had his name on. I would say that I would say he would have had a chance to win them all. And I think he would have gone down in the history as, in my book, the best oval driver that IndyCar ever had. And maybe one of the best. He still had to do work on getting better on road course and street course, but he was one of the best there as well. But for sure, I don't see him. I would have seen him with many Indy 500 trophies in his house.
How different do you think the record books would be if he were still with us?
Greg? Oh, I've said it before. I think if Greg were... Depends how long he would have done IndyCar, first of all, because we talked about he did want to try NASCAR. I think that would be... You look at how successful Helio was in that period, and Helio's became a very good driver, but Greg was on a different level than that to me. So I think he would have won a couple of 500s. He was a very good road course racer, but the Mercedes at the time wasn't really suited to it, shall we say. So I think he would have won a lot. He really would have won a lot. So in one way it would have been fun to see it, and another it might have been slightly disappointing because it would have meant, I think, myself and some other people would have won less races.
Well, I think he'd have won the Indy 500. He'd have won championships. He was a young superstar.
How many championships do you think he would win?
Wow, I don't know that. I'm sure many. He was a young guy and had great experience, and he was a charger.
Where would you picture him today? Think he'd be driving an IndyCar like you, or maybe an IMSA, maybe an owner or analyst? During your time with him, did he ever give you any idea where his career wanted to go?
I think he would be still racing. Obviously, he was really young. We never really talked about what he was going to do beyond IndyCar, because actually he just had signed his contract with Roger. I mean, he was in the beginning of his IndyCar career, so I can't answer for that, but I'm pretty sure, knowing him, he will still be here.
I don't know. I think probably I'd have to do the math, but I think Greg would be retired. I think he'd be sitting at home with some baby Borgs, and maybe he'd still be doing some sports car stuff. Who knows? He certainly had the talent to keep going for a really long time.
Think he'd be driving like Kanaan or an owner like your dad?
Well, I would say that the likelihood would be he would still be driving. But Tony is kind of a rare case. I mean, Tony's a very, very, very fit guy who, has been able to stay young and stay with one team for a long time. So, he could be in a phase like a guy like Helio, who achieved tremendous success, but is now kind of in the sports car phase of his life. He could easily have transitioned to something like that. I think that's where a lot of us will go. When our time comes to get out of the IndyCar, you can transition over to sports car racing and do that for a long time.
Different drivers, different individuals have different objectives after they come out of the cockpit. I'll give you, for instance, I drove as late as I could and still felt that it was competitive. And I had fear that I love it so much that I would overstay. But then there are others, like even my son Michael, where he came out of the cockpit at age 42, still at the very top of his game. Why? Because he looked forward to doing what he's doing now, to being a team owner. He looked forward to the business side of racing. He had, that's something I never cared for. So each individual will look at things differently. I never had any ambition to be an official, to be any of that. All I wanted was drive. But some others, are cool with being involved in, in the technical side, the rulemaking, and just be part of it in that respect. So it's a very personal thing.
Well, I don't know. I mean, his dad was in the automobile business, and maybe after his racing career, he might have gone to work for his dad. I'm not sure, but look, I think all these drivers have ideas where they want to go, but I think you've got to be a champion and be a leader in the sport you're in. And I think that Greg, he had some time to prove what he could do in IndyCar, and certainly after that, NASCAR, Formula One, you never know what he might have done.
We're here at Daytona International Speedway, where Greg got to drive an IROC car 20 years ago. Max told me that Greg was actually going to drive a NASCAR. Let's go see what other drivers and owners think about this. Let's go.
I knew that Greg and his dad, Rick, they had it all planned out. The part that I knew that he was going to go and definitely win a lot of Indy 500 with Roger Penske, and then go and drive NASCAR and be one of the best there. That's as far as I knew. Then I think he would have made enough money that he would have just invited me to his house for vacation.
Max actually once told me when I was interviewing him that Greg was going to go into NASCAR a few years after. Did you know that?
So I've definitely heard that he had a genuine interest in going NASCAR racing, which I think it's cool that, my career path's kind of taken me that direction and being able to use Greg's design, and because I used his design before I ever drove a stock car was when I was open wheel racing, and it was cool and people recognized it, and I had a lot of fans like yourself come up to me and tell me how cool it was that I was running Greg's helmet, because there are a lot of Canadian race fans that still have a lot of passion for Greg, and I really learned to appreciate. I mean, I've gotten gifts from fans that were fans of Greg. I mean, pictures of, signed pictures of Greg and things. They're like, oh, I know you'd appreciate this much more than I would. And it's been really cool to understand that he left such a mark on so many people, and to be able to bring that on the NASCAR side of things, and carry on his legacy, I guess.
Well, I mean, if it was what he wanted, it's respectable. You got to respect everybody's choice, everybody's desire, and it's whatever he wants to do. There's no right or wrong. I think at the end of the day, we're all human and we all have passions.
Well, I mean, that would have been fun to see, and there's no doubt that Greg could have been able to do that very well. Sometimes you just see people that have a lot of heart for racing and talented, and Greg had all that. And I mean, watching him race, before his accident, I was a big fan of his, and it would have been fun, and I'm sure he would have been successful at going NASCAR racing.
I always thought he wanted to be in IndyCar racing, but or maybe Formula One. NASCAR, that didn't seem to be his thing. But I didn't know Greg that well to be able to make that judgment. But Greg had the ability to go wherever he wanted to. I think, whether it was IndyCar, Formula One, or NASCAR, and you never quite know where you're going to end up. And obviously he had signed a deal with Penske, on the eve of his passing. So he was obviously going to be in IndyCars for a long time, and I'm sure Roger would have made some NASCAR opportunities available to him as well. I've not heard that, but I think it's possible.
I mean, I think he wanted to. Ultimately, he just signed a contract with Penske, so he was going to be in IndyCar for a while, but I think that definitely NASCAR was something he would have tried.
Well, let's just say that I think I'm glad Greg. There are some things in the world that never happened, and maybe that was a good thing that never happened. But we certainly liked Greg as an IndyCar driver.
Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you learned something about Greg Moore if you didn't know who he was. And if you did, I hope you learned something new. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Are you the one in the lead? I'm the blue car. The red car there is Alex Zanardi, and he just won the championship, so I can beat him every once in a while.
We sound like two girls discussing the race. Oh, you're the blue car?
I'm in the blue car. It's the blue car and the red car, and I'm in the blue car. This is at Rio de Janeiro. I'm in second, he's in first, and just see, there's a couple inches there. And there I go, taking the checkered flag.
Incredible. Incredible.
Thank you.